All righty, we're going to call the meeting to order. Good morning. We are reconvening our meeting, and I'd like to ask Tara to please take roll call. I believe Paul Schifino's on the phone. Okay. Is there anyone on the phone?
No, we can't start until.
We don't have a quorum? Oh. Okay, we can't start. So let the record show that we can't start because there's an agendized meeting. Well, we can do this. Happy birthday, Joan. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Can I make a comment? Did you know that birthdays are good for your health? Studies have shown that people who have more birthdays live longer.
All righty, good morning. We're reconvening our meeting. Paul Schifino is on the phone. Paul, is there any public with you there at your location?
No, no one's here.
Thank you. Tara, please take roll call.
Kevin Albanese. Here. Augie Beltran.
Here.
Linda Clifford. Here. Dave Diaz. Here. Susan Granzella. Here. Joan Hancock. Here. Pastor Herrera.
Here.
Ed Lang.
Here.
Michael Layton. Marlo Richardson. Here. Frank Shutter.
Here.
Paul Schifino.
Here.
Nancy Springer. Here. Thank you.
Thank you. In order to allow the CSLB sufficient time to conduct its scheduled business, public comment may be limited to a reasonable amount of time for each member of the public. Considering today's agenda, I will be limiting comments to 5 minutes, although I will consider requests by members of the public for additional time to address the board. It is not necessary to repeat statements or views of a previous speaker. It is sufficient to state that you agree. Today, we have a member of the, no, we don't have a member of the public, but Paul Schifino is on the conference call. The board values input from the public as part of its consumer protection mission. It invites and welcomes public comment during this section of the agenda. However, board members cannot engage in dialogue with those who testified during this section of the agenda due to the constraints imposed on the CSLB and its members by law. The law prohibits the CSLB from substantively discussing or voting on any matter brought up during public comment. A member of the public who would like the board to discuss a topic not listed on the agenda can ask the board to consider placing the issue on the board's agenda for a future meeting. If you have an application, complaint, or disciplinary charges pending before the board, we ask that you not discuss the details of your case or pending complaint, since the board members will be the judges and by law are not permitted to receive evidence or information that is not part of the administrative record of the case. The public may provide general comments during this time for items not on the agenda, or if your comment is related to a specific agenda item, you may provide comments as the agenda item comes up for discussion. We will ask the public comment prior to taking action on any item. If we forget to ask for public comment, believe me, we will know about it, right? Yeah. Thank you, Counselor. The public can raise their hand and ask to make a comment after board discussion, and they will be recognized. The CSLB cannot take any action on items not listed on the agenda. While we are encouraged to share information and ideas between our boards, please remember to keep your comments specific to the items on the agenda. Are there any individuals from the public who would like to make a comment? No. Anyone from the board? No. Anyone on the phone? No. Very well. We move on to agenda item C, overviews of CSLB divisions and operations. Wendy?
Morning, everyone. We'll get started here. CSLB schedules over 35,000 exams annually. Each working day, we have available all 46 different trade exams and the law exam. And at any given moment, between 1 and 3 different versions of each of those exams are available to be administered to candidates. A number of statutes and guidelines, as well as case law, establish the standards that are the basis for licensure and certification programs in the state of California. We have 46 different exams, and testing division is responsible for developing, maintaining, and administering them. There's a law and business exam, 43 trade exams, and 2 certification exams. All of CSLB's licensing and certification exams are developed according to the highest level of testing standards, and they're updated every 5 to 7 years. By law, they must be kept current to reflect changing industry technology and techniques. The process takes about a year for each exam. We start off with the occupational analysis. Each exam's occupational analysis has multiple purposes: to define the scope of the trade, to ensure that the scope of the trade is covered by the exam, to develop new job-related questions, to use as a blueprint, to create parallel exam versions, and to use in court to defend examination results. There are 6 steps to this process, and it takes about 4 months to complete. SMEs, subject matter experts, are used at every step of the way. Each exam program is assigned to a testing exam specialist, and they maintain a database of interested contractors. These are active licensees who are in good standing and live in California. They're recruited as the first step in the OA process. These licensees, or a sample of them if there are over 2,000, are contacted through mail or email. SMEs who are recent and more experienced licensees, those who are from large and small businesses, different parts of the state, and representative of the different specialties in the trade, are sought. We do not invite to workshops contractors who have a conflict of interest with test development, such as those who teach at trade schools or apprenticeship programs. Each workshop starts with an SME ID check, some orientation, a briefing on security, and training on what needs to be accomplished in the 2 to 3 days. They get reimbursed for travel plus $150 per day. Exam specialists facilitate all the different types of workshops. SMEs, we have SMEs who have come to workshops for well over 15 years. multiple cycles, multiple trades. Some are brand-new contractors, and some are the experts who wrote the trade manuals. We have people coming from one-man striping companies all the way up to large corporations who build dams and satellites. Workshop experience is very positive, and we know this because we have many, many repeat SMEs. They come for the stories about who helped build Disney World, the opportunity to learn more about their trade, networking, but mostly they come to give back to their trade. They're amazing. We have one contractor who sends us postcards on his vacations. We have a postcard mounted of Castle Menzies from Scotland, and he's a very dedicated SME. The second step in the process is the audit process. We perform between 8 and 12 job interview audits. This is where the exam specialist goes to the SME's office or job site and talks to them about what is done. It's important to select contractors for audits that are from different parts of the state, so we do travel, and who represent the different specialties in the trade. From these contractors, the exam specialists develop a draft list of tasks and knowledge statements. These are to describe the trade in terms of actual activities that are performed and the knowledge needed for safe and competent practice. These are an opportunity for the contractors to show us, yes, they're beautiful woodworking projects, they're huge asphalt machines, they're sewer pipe camera robots, and yes, I have been shown all these things when I was an exam specialist. They get very excited about sharing their knowledge with us. And then that's an opportunity for the exam specialist to invite them to workshops and get them involved in our process. The third step is to conduct the first OA, or occupational analysis workshop. This is where the SMEs refine those task statements developed by the exam specialist. These tasks describe the activities that contractors perform in their work. The SMEs add to, refine, delete the task statements, and organize them in content areas, major and minor content areas, to give structure to the exam plan that we're going to develop next. They also refine the knowledge statements. The knowledges describe what knowledges and abilities are needed to perform the tasks. And lastly, they link those knowledge statements and those task statements in a formal linkage document. The fourth step is to conduct an occupational analysis survey. And we send this out to the active licensees in the trade. The purpose is to collect ratings, frequency and importance ratings of all the tasks, and then importance ratings for all the knowledges. It's a long survey. This is an example of tasks where you get 2 ratings. How frequently do you perform this task? How important is this task to the performance of your job? These ratings are used in the next workshop as a basis to develop an exam outline. This is SurveyMonkey. We do all of our surveys on SurveyMonkey, and our typical response rate is between 5% and 24%. Please keep in mind that these surveys take between 30 minutes and an hour and a half to complete, depending on how broad the trade is. The B, of course, is a very long survey. A second occupational analysis workshop is the 5th step in the process. Through discussion and using the survey results, the SMEs determine the content of the exam. They make the decisions. What different weights the different areas need. For instance, how many estimation questions, how many job site safety questions go on each version of the exam. That's what they decide. They develop an exam outline, and that is used as a blueprint to build exam versions. The last step in the OA cycle is a validation report, to report the content validation process that was used. This is what makes CSOB's exams legally defensible in court should the need ever arise. It proves that the exam questions are job-related. The next cycle is the examination development cycle. It follows after the OA cycle. It takes more like 8 months with SME input, again, at every step. Exam questions are created by active licensed contractors, so the resulting exams are job-related and relevant to each trade. The SMEs receive training in what constitutes a good multiple-choice question. Questions must be job-related, which is demonstrated by linking them to the exam outline. The questions must also be in the correct difficulty range and separate the qualified from the unqualified. It takes from 3 to 7 workshops to develop a new bank of 300 to 900 questions. All of our exams have an overall emphasis on public protection. Reclassify workshops are the next step, and that's where SMEs go through the entire old question bank and evaluate what needs changing. They decide whether to retain a question as it is, modify it, or delete it. They use question statistics and comments from actual candidates to make the question improvements. They find supporting documentation for the questions in code books and other industry reference books. Each question is tied to the exam outline. Question development workshops. Writing new questions is the hardest of all the SME tasks. It's usually quite a ways outside their normal area of expertise. And they have to write to the exam outline, so each question is tied to a task and knowledge statement that is relevant to their trade practice. They write multiple choice questions on the laptops you can see on the screen there, and those are sent to the exam specialist with our secure software. The exam specialists edit them for grammar, format, and such, and these new questions go on to another workshop of SMEs to review the questions. Each exam development also includes the SMEs updating the supplemental exam material. These are multi-page booklets that contain blueprints, drawings, trade tables that are needed to answer specific questions. The booklets are laminated, bound, audit numbered, and tracked very carefully for exam security. Question review workshops. A group of SMEs will review each newly written question, evaluating it for relevance, clarity, correct answer, reasonable incorrect answers, and a current reference. They control what goes on the exam. On a 3-year cycle, the new set of California Building Standards codes is published. It is a priority for testing division to get all of the exam program's code-based questions referenced to these new codes, as well as other code books that come out on different cycles. This involves numerous extra workshops. Standard setting for an exam program occurs in a 3-day passing score pass point workshop. After a training session, the SMEs rate and discuss all of the questions in the bank using the Angoff method. This criterion-based method is the most widely accepted standard setting method in the U.S. Passing scores do vary between exams, the different trades, but the overall passing rate across all the trades is roughly 50%. Candidates who meet the minimum qualifications to be safe and competent pass and get licensed as required by BMP Code 101.6. Also at this workshop, items are identified that cannot appear on the same exam version together. For instance, when we have 3 exam versions of the B out there, there could be questions that are too similar to each other to be on the same version. They can be on different versions, or they give a clue. They give away the answer to another question. So we identify those questions. Every candidate is required to take a law and business exam as well as a specific trade exam. And each candidate for licensure receives a law and business study guide and a specific trade study guide from CSOB along with their notice to appear. The study guide provides an overview of what the exam covers, test site policy, test strategy, 3 sample questions, and a list of recommended study materials and websites. New exam release. When a new question bank is ready, new exam versions are created and prepared for release. These exams may contain pre-test questions. These are questions that we try out, but they don't count towards passing or failing. Part of maintaining quality in the exam banks is to see how pre-test questions perform before they are actually released and count towards passing and failing. Periodically, new versions are released and the old ones are retired and statistical analyses are performed. Questions that have issues are set aside in the bank, not to be used, but to be held for review until the next SME workshop. New question banks will have accompanying new drawing or booklet. I have trouble with this every time. Blueprint booklet, very hard to say. On the screen you can see the lime green, that's the A booklet. And CSB also provides a basic calculator, a scale, and a whiteboard for candidates to do math questions. That's also shown on the desktop. Candidates receive instructions through the earphones. It's a very quiet process. Testing Division maintains 8 proctored test centers, and candidates get 3.5 hours for each exam. Walk-in candidates are accepted if seats are available and they're already scheduled for a future exam. When candidates arrive at the test centers, they are identified, seated, and monitored by CSLB staff. At the computer using headphones, they are instructed by listening to a voice on how to take their own photo for identification, how to sign on the touch screen, how to start their exam, select questions, skip over questions, return to unanswered questions, end their exam, and reveal their score. Special testing arrangements are made for anyone requesting ADA accommodation. Each test center has a private room for individual testing. Readers are provided by CSLB if a reading accommodation is requested. Candidates may comment on their exam. During the exam, they can type in comments anytime on the computer during it. They can fill out a comment form after the exam, and then they can send in an appeal letter at any time. Security is essential in maintaining the integrity of the exam. Staff is trained to detect candidate misconduct. If it is confirmed, the candidate's application is denied, and they will not be able to reapply for 1 year. Some of our more memorable candidates in test centers were the one in Sacramento. A gentleman fell asleep at his test station. They could not wake him up. They came to my office, got me. We were yelling his name in his ear, shaking his shoulder, wondering, should we do more? We called the paramedics in case he was actually unconscious. By the time the paramedics came, they were able to wake him up. He got up, walked around, sat down, took his exam, and passed. And then there was the gentleman who had a motorcycle accident on his way to the test center, insisted, though he was bleeding, on taking his exam, even though we offered him a free retest. One of the other candidates took him to the restroom, cleaned the blood up a little bit, brought him back. He did sit for his whole exam. I do not recall whether he passed. But we get all types. So there was the landscaper with his handy machete attached to his belt, even though there are signs up about weapons. He obviously did not consider it a weapon, nor did the gentleman with the bullet-studded belt. That raised a few eyebrows at the test center. But our staff is well trained on how to deal with unusual circumstances. Our exam process is completely computerized. SCORE is our custom software for exam development and administration. It is a suite of applications that create and maintain question banks, creates, retires, and releases exam versions, administers and scores exams, and analyzes administration statistics at many levels. The acronym, you probably can't read it up there, stands for State Contractors Official Regulatory Exams. All of our exams are administered on touchscreens, and the candidates really have accepted them well. They also particularly like getting their results immediately. All of our exam data is encrypted. Roughly 2% of our exams are translator exams. Special translator days are set aside for candidates who request language accommodation. Such days occur 2 to 3 days per month, depending on demand and depending on which test center they wanted. In August, the Berkeley Test Center started translator exams for the very first time. It was the final site to receive SCORE's new translator hardware and software called STARS. On the very first day of deployment, cheating was confirmed by candidate and translator. An exam was terminated. It does happen. And as you see on this screen, this is the Sacramento Test Center. We seat the candidates so the translators cannot visually signal them. They are not seated next to each other. They're wearing earphones. So they're in the same room, but they can't do A, B, C, D. No visual signaling. But where there's a will, there's a way. So candidates who need translators must apply for this process. They provide their own translators who may not be studying or working in the legal or construction fields. They also must be pre-approved by CSLB staff. Candidates and translators are monitored by staff throughout their exams, both visually and by listening on earphones. Since visual signaling is prevented, Conduct usually consists of auditory signaling, such as A, B, C, D. Staff is trained to catch this, plus many, many variations on that theme. All translator exams are recorded, so they may be reviewed by a professional translator if misconduct is suspected and an exam has been terminated. For security purposes, translators may only translate once per year. They have to wait an entire year in between translating. And you'll be happy to know, this is my last slide. Steps to licensure. Passing candidates fall into 3 groups. There are those who passed a supplemental exam. They're congratulated but receive no materials from testing staff. However, most people are new licensed candidates, and they receive the packet that you have in front of you. It contains a bond and fee letter, the asbestos open book exam, a workers' compensation form, a form for inactive status, and EDD information on being an employer. They are congratulated and provided with the date the forms are due. The last group of passing candidates does not receive the packet because their application has not yet cleared by CSLB's criminal background unit, or the application is undergoing the experience verification process. They are told to wait for contact from CSLB. Candidates who fail one or both exams receive a reschedule letter confirming what to do and what date it is due, plus a breakdown of how they performed in different content areas, showing where they may wish to study. There's a 3-week waiting period to retest, and they can choose to retest any time within 90 days after their exam, after they've waited the 3 weeks. Failure to appear candidates receive an automatic letter which informs them of how and when to reschedule, or if their application has become void, they are informed of that. Passing can be a very emotional experience. I ask for examples of passing, and sometimes they get a little too excited and a little too loud, but there was one particular candidate my staff mentioned who had failed several times his exam, and when he finally passed, he was so excited. He went home, had his wife bake a cake, and he brought it back for the staff, who then ate it. Are there any questions?
Question? I'm sorry. Now we're too old for dots. You said there's a 3-week waiting period. Is that, when does the 90 days start? Is it at that point of failure or notice, or is it after the 3-week wait?
Do you know, Charlotte? I assume it's from the test date, 90 days from the test date.
It's from the test date.
The 3-week wait is to encourage them to study. Sometimes candidates will think, well, if I'm just lucky, I'm going to get 5 more questions right. I'm going to take a different exam, and I'm just going to be lucky. But the 3 weeks is so that they have an opportunity. And it's not good for them to come day after day after day, day after day after day, seeing the exam many, many more times than they should, memorizing as they go. So the 3 weeks works both for exam security and to offer them that opportunity to study.
Yeah, my concern was not about the 3 weeks. It was about the fairness of 90 days. Should it be 90 days plus 3 weeks? But that might be a future agenda
Well,
item.
maybe Laura wants to talk about that bill where that 90 days will go away if it passes.
Sure. The board is actually sponsoring legislation this year. Yeah, so if the governor signs it, it's on his desk, it would eliminate the 2 provisions that would void an application based on testing issues, so.
Any other, yes.
So I was interested about the versions. You said there's these various versions. So I wondered, has there ever been a challenge on which version of the test someone is taking?
No.
No? And I get 2 versions, but I'm confused about having actually 3 versions of the test out. Why would there be 3 versions?
Well, it's because trades, for instance, I know right off the top, the law and the B are taken the most frequently. So lots and lots of people take those. It's good to have different versions so that if someone is talking to another candidate in the restroom, chances are they got a different version. They're not all taking the same one or even 2 versions.
Right. So within a test center, if there's 10 people taking the B test, 30% of them could be taking different, they could
It-
all be different tests?
It picks
at
it
the end, right.
randomly.
Okay.
So the large-scale exams that get lots of exposure and lots of people take it, they're the ones that have 3 versions out there. We have quite a number of medium-sized exams. They get 2 versions out there. And the small ones, like elevator, there's just 1 version out there. We get, 10 people a year?
Okay. Last thing, when you, is it the same types of questions, or have you ever checked on the 3 versions whether there's a better passing on one than another?
Well, no, we haven't checked the different pass rate. The SCORE does not collect data that way. But what we do when we create them, they have to follow the blueprint. So they all have exactly the same number of safety questions,
Right.
exactly the same number of booklet questions. So they're following that. And then when we're making them, before they're released, we look at the difficulty level, because the exam questions, we have that data, and we look at the Angoff ratings that were given to them when the exam was last done from the ground up, those ratings, and we make sure the 3 versions are very close to each other in difficulty and Angoff ratings. So that's what makes them parallel.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes. Go ahead.
I just need clarification. You mentioned we have the code book adoption every 3 years, and when you take that into account. But do you go back and look at the exams, all the questions that might have code questions, and revise them if they've changed because of the code adoption?
Yes, that's what we need to do, and we're really in the process of doing that. Luckily, the code books came out in July like they were supposed to this cycle, which is wonderful. We have them in hand, and we've already been holding numerous code workshops to update the versions. We can't release them with changes until the first of the year, but we've been working at it already. Yes, no exam can go out on January 1st with an old code question that's wrong. That would be bad.
Yes, David.
Yeah, on that, do you get that from the Building Standards Commission, and they can give you just a list of all the changes, or do you have to actually go through the code books themselves?
Well, we have a couple of different approaches, and mostly what we do is hold workshops with contractors. We print out all the code questions on different color paper. So the electrical code will be blue, and the building code will be orange, and different code, electrical code will be yellow. And we have a workshop with contractors, and we pass them out. And as a group, they look them up. Now, the majority of what we're covering in the exams are basic code questions, because they have to know them off the top of their head. They're not really obscure ones. So they tend not to change in the 3-year cycle. Some things do change, but a lot of the questions that are asked, if it's 4 inches 3 years ago, it's still 4 inches. So there's not a lot of change, but we don't know that as exam specialists. So we have the SMEs look them up in the code books and make sure the question's still good as it is. If it needs changing, we change it, but then we can't release it until January.
Okay.
But they don't show us, tell us what's new. We have to rely on the books, which do have the lines in the columns that show changes.
Yeah, I sit on IAPMA's Uniform Mechanical Code, and I actually do the process of the code changes, and then I sit on the Code Advisory Committee for the Building Standards Commission, so I know exactly how they change, but it would be easy just to make a list of the changes and them give them to you. I don't understand why they don't. That's all.
I could pursue that. That sounds wonderful.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the board? We'll go with Pastor
Thank
and then-
thank you very much for your presentation. I didn't realize the comprehensiveness of what you had to go through to develop an exam. I mean, it was very educational for us to hear the different processes. As you go through each of the workshops, do you have the same persons, or maybe 1 or 2 of the same persons, actually on the second workshop as you go through different scenarios as to develop questions, or you have a new group each time?
Well, we are dependent on volunteers. So on smaller trades, where there are fewer contractors to invite, there is somewhat of a tendency of an active group coming, and you don't tend to get lots of new people. We try for a balance. The ideal is to have some more experienced and some new people in, and we try actively try recruiting new contractors because they have a different perspective.
Absolutely.
But they are also the ones who are busiest trying to build up their business and make money and get on their feet. We have a tendency for more established contractors to have more time to come to workshops. But we try to get a mix whenever we can. It's nice to have continuity. It's nice to have someone who came 5 years earlier or 3 years earlier and came into a workshop and they help new people buy into the process. Oh yeah, I did this 15 years ago. It's a good long process. They give a lot of, they help the new people understand the process, and it helps the workshops be productive.
Another question, just very briefly on translators. Do you find that the system that you actually have currently works, or do you think it might be more appropriate or for avoiding cheating that you actually identify translators that might be available to do the translations?
The reason why we don't pick the translators for them is, am I too close? Oh. Is because if they don't pass, then they can claim, well, you didn't pick a good translator for me. And because there are so many different variations in language and sub-languages, they can pick someone who can speak to them. They pick, if they want to pay a translator, they can. If they want a family member, they can choose that too. It's better than us providing them and then having the liability of, I don't like your translator. I would have passed if you'd given me a better translator. So it does work pretty well.
So
The people, the candidates are happy with our process.
And how do you say here that you pre-approve the translator? What is that process undertake?
That is verifying that they are not contractors unto themselves. They do not have a legal background that would help them pass the law and business exam. The translator needs to not be knowledgeable of the subject matter such that they don't have a conflict of interest.
So how do you verify that?
The specifics, I can't tell you exactly. There's a process where the translator fills out a long form of their background. I don't know how much verification my staff does of, is it true? I do know that whenever there's something that looks a little odd, they will contact the person to get more information. What did you do? Were you selling carpet, or were you helping with the estimation? Just selling carpet may be okay, but if you're doing estimation for people, that would be a conflict if you were going to be translating the C15 flooring and something covering exam. Did that answer?
Yeah, that's your answer. I just was wondering if there might be more, I mean, they could lie on the exam, I mean, on the application, I guess, if they wanted to. The translator could say that, he or she's a teacher or maybe just a court translator or whatever, and I would just wonder if you would verify that, maybe their employment, see what they're actually doing, or just to
I can
avoid
find
that.
out how deeply they go. I have to tell you, I do not know. I've only known of cases that have been brought to me where this one's sort of borderline. Do I approve him or not? He's not the translator person. He or she is not a slam dunk, falls in one category or the other. So those are the only ones I'm familiar with. I will find out how much verification is done.
Do other boards also have the same system as you do for translators?
I believe other boards do quite a variety of things. This is the process that we develop, but I'm not familiar with other boards' processes.
Cindy, you got something?
Yeah, so in relationship to the translator program, though, the score recording and monitoring does assist to ensure that if there is any suspect of the translator providing the answers, they have the ability, like from Sacramento, the exam is being given in Norwalk, they can contact someone who will listen in specifically to monitor that. And that's kind of a new thing that we have as far as the remote access, but we do have
As the
that.
exam is progressing live, yes, that is new for us. We have, among our staff, we have a fair number of different languages represented. So we can go to any of them and say, is the person, saying, in a language we don't know, pick this answer,
Frank, you had something?
Well, I was just going to, we were talking about code changes. I know a lot of municipalities don't adopt those code changes. So somebody working in, let's say, Northern California, in an area where they don't adopt a new code for 3 years, it might be a little confusing. Dave was pointing out that maybe we ought to list the code changes by craft or something like that. It probably would be helpful to the candidates.
Well, excuse me.
Yeah, that's my point.
We address that in one way. If there is a brand new code that we feel new candidates who want to be licensed, 4 years journey level experience out there aren't going to know yet, we have the opportunity of writing it to a new question and setting it aside temporarily ineligible for 1 year while the word gets out. And that is the contract. The SMEs in the workshop decide if this is something they need to know right away, or let's give it a year's time. So we do have that. But as far as being behind in adopting code, that is a problem. Some municipalities have extra codes. But as a state exam, we have to ask code questions based on the California State Code that's legally enforceable now.
Anything on the phone?
No, I just wanted to say thank you very much. Oh, someone
You had
on the phone?
anything, did you have something, Paul?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to mention is you guys, I did have the opportunity about, I don't know, a million years ago, 10 years ago, to be one of the people that were called by the CSLB. That's how I initially got involved, to help write the C-51. And it was amazing how efficient and well-run and professional and engaging, and I could not say enough good things about how the CSLB put this all together. It was just incredible to watch.
Thank you for your comments. Susan?
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you very much for doing this and making it, being able to demonstrate what an important service this is. And you did a great job. It was informative, and I'm very happy that we're all able to share the information that you do, because it's very complicated and it is very important for the support for California. So thank you.
Members of the public, anybody in the public, please take the dais. Please take the dais. State your name and your business.
My name's Daniel Cohen. I had a question about the lawn business. With the 3-year code cycle that you do for the trades, do you do that if there's a change, like in the reference book for the lawn business? Do you do that every year?
I had mentioned earlier that there are other codes that vary on different cycles. And yes, the law book changes each year. And the person who has the law exam assigned to them, the exam specialist, has to keep up with the law book each year. Any changes?
Thank you.
Any other members of the public? Anyone from the board? Anything on the phone? Thank you, Wendy. Next up, Charlotte with the licensing overviews.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to talk about the licensing division. So this is the workload for licensing. We currently have over 200,000 active licensees and over 15,000 active HIS, home improvement salesperson registrations, that we process applications for issue licenses for and registrations for, and then we have to maintain all of those. And in conjunction with that, we also have the 44 classifications that we provide information to our constituency for, Public Works and industry. The different processes that are provided are the applications for licensure and renewal that are processed. We also do the classification determinations. We have 2 licensing deputies that handle this workload. They perform written and oral classification determinations. They provide the proper classifications for work that is going to be performed. And also, we get a lot of inquiries on Public Works when there's a dispute. They feel they have the proper classification, and we hear from our contractors because the Public Works is asking for a different classification to do the work, so we hear from them. Licensing also manages the Licensing Information Center and the public counter. We do the family support and judgment documents that are associated with our licenses. And a big part of the LIC work, it's important to remember that whenever we're current, they have less calls and call wait times go down. So right now it's being managed very well. Our call wait times are real low because almost all the app processes are under 3 weeks. As you know, we have 42 specialty classes, including the new C22 asbestos and our A engineering and the B general building classification. We have over 14,000, almost close to 15,000 engineering licensees, and all this work is done on big projects that are fixed works. But we also do some not so typical project work that it's involved in this classification, like commercial garages, food plant trolley systems. We're getting a lot of that right now. And big commercial kiln installations. So things that we haven't seen a lot of ag stuff right now. More than anything, we have B general building contractors. We have almost, I think, 102,000 of them. There's a lot of them. So this is work that's performed on a structure, and it's either being built, being improved, or being repaired. That's a contractor that can do framing or carpentry, and 2 other unrelated trades. So during the last fiscal year, the licensing division really did an outstanding job. We processed over 20,000 applications and issued almost 13,000 new licenses and processed 108,000 applications. We also assisted over 151,000 telephone callers in the LIC. So it's an extreme amount of work for our staff. They did an excellent job. These are like the nuts and bolts of every application that comes in the door. By statute, the applicant has to be 18 years of age. Everybody has to go under fingerprinting and disclose their criminal background. And they have to have 4 years of journey-level work experience gained within the last 10 years in the trade that they're going to be licensed in. So, of course, every applicant undergoes an evaluation of their experience. So we have this statutory random 3%, but every staff member that processes an application takes a look at the experience to make sure they meet the minimum criteria. It's very important. Every certification of work experience is signed under the penalty of perjury. That is scrutinized very carefully, and all the information that's set forth on it. And of course, we also will accept college education and trade apprenticeship training as part of the experience. They can use part of that 4-year period, can be the college or trade apprenticeship, but they have to have at least 1 year hands-on journey level trade experience to complete that 4-year period. So if the experience is authenticated through the documentation that the application has in it, and then it's just verified and moved along to issuance. So that's either through the 3% verification process or just as part of the application process where it's reviewed. In the 3%, if the experience is not verified, and that again is based on whatever the applicant provides to us, like we talked about yesterday, then they have either the option to withdraw the application and try it again when they've got it together, or the application can be denied. So if the applicant withdraws their application, there's no harm, no foul. The test scores that run parallel that they receive during that time period, they can keep those test scores for 5 years, and then when they can meet the 4-year requirement, they can move forward with licensure. If the application is denied and then the applicant is given information because they have a chance to appeal, if they appeal, then they can move forward with that process. But if they don't, after 60 days, the application is denied, and then they're going to have to wait for 12 months before they can try to reapply. And in most instances, they'll come back in, and they'll have what they need to reapply, and they're able to move forward with licensure. So the final requirements for licensure is after they test and they've got their criminal background check taken care of, their experience is good to go, they're going to submit the fees, which is $180 currently. That's the initial licensing fee. And whatever bonds, of course, everyone needs a contractor bond for an active license. But if they have qualifiers that need to provide bonds of qualifying individual, if it's a limited liability company, they need a bond, a worker bond. So there's a lot of different requirements depending on the entity. Of course, if the employee has workers, they need to provide a current workers' comp. And the roofing classification requires it regardless whether they can't have an exemption ever. So this is just really important to know that expedites testing, criminal background experience, all of those things go on concurrently. We don't want to make our applicants wait. We understand that it's important. This is their livelihood. They're trying to get licensed. So we move forward on all levels. Of course, the criminal background and experience verification, the onus is on the applicant. If they fail to get fingerprinted right away, and then they're like, where's my license? Well, did you fingerprint? And when they don't, then they have to start that process at the end of the game. The waiting is kind of hard for them. The experience verification is the same thing. If they wait until the very last minute to provide any of the documentation to prove the authenticity of their experience, that again is on them. I mean, there's time that they have plenty of time to submit it. So we do have reciprocity with these 3 states, Arizona, Nevada, and Utah. When they meet the statutory requirements for reciprocity and their reciprocal trades, then they can get a waiver of that examination for that trade. The staff really scrutinizes this. They have a reciprocity form that they send in that verifies from the other state what the standing is of their license, how long they've held it, what trades they have the license in, and that is reviewed. Staff also goes onto those websites and takes a look at the licenses on those license boards. So this is a great little summary of the app process. When the app comes in the door, it's reviewed for accuracy and content. And we go ahead and take a look at every part of the application. We want to make sure all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed. We looked at the experience. We make sure the criminal background check is completed. They've passed the law and trade. If they're C61, it's law only, of course. And that all the issuance requirements are provided. So each step has like a 90-day window. App comes in, it's processed. If there's anything they need to provide us with, just in the standard application process, it's 90 days. Once they've completed their tests, they've passed them both, we give them 90 days to submit the issuance requirements. The criminal background steps are the same thing. They have 3 months for each one of these steps, which is ample time for them to complete. Then the license is issued. The active license is 2 years at the beginning, and every 2 years after that for an active license it's 2, and then the inactive license is for 4 years. Everything is uploaded in real time on our website. So when someone calls the LIC or they call a technician in one of the units, they're saying, I didn't get the letter, I don't have the information, it is always on the website. The first thing they get is a PIN letter that says, we got your app, here's your app fee number, here's your PIN number. You can get general information without the PIN number, or if you use the PIN number, you can go onto our website and find out exactly where your app is at every step. So they always have that information available to them. It's also a really handy thing when they're trying to figure out where they are in licensed transaction documents they've submitted for processing. They can look at their license. If they're waiting for their workers' comp to be updated and there was an intent to suspend notice on there, once it's updated, it automatically removes that notice, so they know their workers' comp was processed. So they can always look on our website for that information. All they have to do is either put in their app fee or license number right here. If they don't have that information, they can bring up by personnel, by the business name, whatever they want to look up here in the instant license check, they can get it. So there's just really no reason they don't know what's going on with their license. They should know at every step. We walk them through this. Oftentimes we'll get called in the transaction units and they'll say, I never knew, I didn't get notified, I have no idea when my license expires. And the supervisors and staff will take the time to walk them through using our website so they get a clear picture of what their license looks like online, how they can check it. I know that LIC provides that information too. I know that our website information can also be viewed in like 82 languages through Google Translation. This is just really interesting, I think. The oldest license that's active and on the books is Tykert, number 8. We use this license. It's interesting if we're we want to look something up and how things looked 40 years ago. Personnel, these people have like more personnel pages than any license on our website. I think that's like 18 or 24 pages long. It's huge. And I think actually this is the license. We always know when we need to expand the number of personnel pages we have, because theirs has exceeded the range. So every license shows the business name, the entity, the expiration date, when it was issued. It provides us general information for both the licensee and the consumer trying to use the license. It always indicates the status of the license, if there's any pending enforcement actions that have taken place, the classes they hold, what the current status is of their bond, who holds the bond, And every time they want to come on here, if there's a problem, they can click on the bonding company and find out more information about what their address is. It'll tell how much the bond is. You can get all the information you need is just here at your fingertips. You can also get information about when there's a bond of qualifying individual on file, when they have one or more individuals that has less than 10% ownership or voting stock or equity in an LLC or a corporation. They need to have the bond of qualifying individual in file. And it will tell exactly who holds that, the amount, the classes. It shows everything here. So these are some of the things that we've been doing that I think is very, very exciting, having been here long enough to see pencil paper on the HIS. And the implementation of the smart form is fantastic. I never thought I'd see the day when we had online fees. That's wonderful to see. We have payment kiosks in most of our testing locations. I think we have them in Sac and Fresno, Norwalk, San Diego, and San Bernardino, I think. Yeah, so I know that they're working on Berkeley, Oxnard, and San Jose. We need a little more public counter in order to implement those things there. The thing that's really cool about the HIS Smart Form is that it requires them to fill out the section, and if they don't, it won't let them move forward, which means every form is acceptable by the time they move through it. I have dreams of all of our applications being like this and never sending another correction letter. So definitely we are working on developing these items for both applications, renewals, and license modification forms, which were all the transaction forms, license mod processes, which is disassociations, license cancellations, things like that. So this is pretty much the life cycle of an application. We get the information in the board at the mailroom, we cashier it, we send it to IWAS, all the information is keyed into our TEAL database. It's assigned an app technician who reviews it, they post it. If they're part of the 3%, it could go to have further experience review. Everybody has the criminal background information verified. And then after testing, issuance requirements are submitted, the license is issued, and they get a pocket and wall, and then they're on to business. And here's a good shot of our pockets. I really like the new HIS improved card, which is a different color, so the public will not be confused about the difference between a licensee and a registrant. So I think the color coding is quite important. And then here is a copy of the wall license certificate. They get one when their license is issued, and they can order duplicates, especially if they change their name. Oops, and I guess David votes up next.
Questions from the board? Go ahead.
Hi, Nancy.
Actually, I have two. First one's on the waiver of examinations. You mentioned Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and that sometimes selected trades you'll waiver. I'm not sure which trades you waiver, because my concern would be that we adopt codes here and California makes amendments, though we're on the I codes like they are, there's big differences there. So is that addressed?
I know that we have an MOU with those three states, and I'm not sure what the criteria is for that. I know that now when a reciprocal trade waiver is requested, it's sent to the classification deputy, we make them still submit a certificate of experience, so they have to meet that same general criteria. And then also the reciprocity form is provided. The deputy reviews them both, and then it's determined whether or not they're going to have to take the trade exam. So I'm not sure about the building codes. I could find out for you, though, and let you know. Okay.
And then the second one is on the renewal process. You went through the whole license and application process, but a renewal process, is it, and I know I should know this, but it's 2 or 3 years you get to do the renewal?
Every 2 years for an active licensee, and if it's inactive, every 4 years they submit it.
And is that just a payment, or do they take an exam for an update on the new laws and the new codes? Because there's changes in that time period, so is there an exam required?
Right. No, we have no continuing education. It's the initial exam that they pass at issuance, and then they just renew the license every 2 years if they're active and conducting business.
So how do we confirm that they're updated on that information? I mean, how do we know that they know those new laws and that they know that new code? Is there, I mean, I know you send out literature, but there's nothing that backs that up with the license? Just that
No.
one exam in the beginning?
That's correct.
So on the denial, I was curious, do the test scores still last for 5 years?
Yes.
So they get a denial, they wait a year, they're
Yes.
still, they don't have to take the test again?
Yes.
Okay. And then are we thinking, and Lori may be able to answer this, are the licensing fees going to go up in this new bill that we have getting through the system?
Yes, if the governor signs it, all the fees will go up July 1 of next year.
Okay. Last, I just want to say, you guys do an outstanding job,
Thank
Charlotte.
you.
You're super responsive. And, you know, just to speak to some of the questions that Kevin had yesterday, I was a referral for a person who had like 18 years of experience before they went for a contractor's license. They're a very experienced person, not very articulate. Didn't do a great job explaining what their experience was for that 18 years, including like the last 5 or 6 years running pretty major projects and working with crews and stuff. And they got kicked back from the experience verification. And, you know, they came in and went, and I went, you know, maybe you could tell them, like, the information they're asking.
Right.
You know, and then they give it to you, you know? So I was pretty impressed with that, the fact that that did not get through, because it was clear that he did have all that time.
Right.
Just wasn't doing a good job explaining, you know, what he really did. So I think you guys do just an outstanding job.
Thank you, Linda.
David?
Yeah, I noticed that you had to be 18 years old. I hope there's not a lot of 18-year-old applicants, because I don't know how you get 4 years journey level experience and be 18, just throwing that out.
Family business.
That's exactly what I was going
Yeah.
to say. Yeah, we have a lot of C-12s, Bs that are family business, and they've been working, you know, since they were old enough to have a work permit.
Or before they had a work permit.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's be honest.
Yeah. So of course, we do not accept any of that experience prior to the age of 18. And we are always looking to make sure that, you know, that they provide us, lots of times they just forget to provide us with the fact that they served an apprenticeship time from 18 to 22, working, you know, somewhere, and that we can verify that time period. So we're very cognizant of the 18 to 22-year time period, and we really want to help those applicants provide us with the information that they need to qualify. Yeah.
Anything else from the board? Yes.
Just a quick correction. On slide 13, the Business and Professions Code reference should be 7065.4. So just for the record.
Noted, thank you. On the phone, Paul? Okay, so
Did you say
is he,
7064?
are you still on the line, Paul?
65.4.
Okay, 7065.4. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go to the public for a minute. Nothing from the public. Okay, until we have verification that Paul's on the line, we're gonna have to stop the meeting. Anybody else want to, you know what, why don't we take a 5-minute break then? I know you guys don't like 4-minute breaks. I don't know why. 6 minutes? I got 6 over here.
It's funny.
He's a stingy guy.
Yeah, you could do 6 minutes and be back at 10:15.
Are you calling him, Rick?
This time, just in case, on overviews of CSLB division operations B licensing, were there anything else from the board? No. Anything from the public? Anything on the phone? The answer was no. All right, thank you. David Foat will present the enforcement piece. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Good to discuss my favorite topic, enforcement. Want to mention that we do have a typo under enforcement units. It's not intake and medication centers. Well, our staff may think so. It'd be the intake and mediation centers.
Maybe it should be.
Yes. Medical marijuana.
Did you steal this slide from another bureau?
With that, just a little background on the board-adopted mission statement, and we take this very seriously. We conduct unbiased investigations. We recognize that we do have some bad contractors. We also have consumers that are perhaps not acting ethically. We want to be fair to both parties, and when possible, resolve the construction dispute. This is a kind of a high-level overview of how the Enforcement Division is comprised. There are 214 allocated positions, and they're spread out amongst 4 divisions. These divisions have what we call program managers over each of them. There are 5 program managers because we have 2 over the investigative centers, 1 south and 1 north. The Special Investigations Unit and Special Investigations Unit comprised of peace officers reports to Jesse Flores. What I think is interesting, though, about this slide, I just wanted to point out as to the case handling staff. For the intake mediation centers, there are 30 consumer service representatives that do mediate and pre-screen the complaints. There's another 10 staff that are reviewing cases that are received over the internet and make sure they have the evidence necessary to proceed. In the investigative centers, approximately 60 investigators. The statewide investigative fraud team is comprised of 30 enforcement reps, and we, of course, have 11 peace officers. This slide shows the offices that are open to the public. Now, there are 8 offices depicted. They all have a supervisor and they have support staff. They're open from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. I wanted to mention this because they provide a valuable service to the community. We have consumers that come in to discuss problems they're having with their contractor. They're able to help resolve those, often short of a complaint being filed. We have contractors that come in for the same reason, and we have applicants for a license that want to come in and ask for assistance in filling out the application. I want to throw out to all the board members the opportunity to go visit these offices. They love to meet board members. Many of those offices will even bake for you. Fresno especially. These are the closing dispositions. You'll see that there are 10 closing dispositions. Most of these are used by the Intake Mediation Center, and often cases are closed to insufficient evidence or no violation. But for the more serious matters that can result in revocation or administrative action, that being a citation or an accusation, are referred to the prosecutor. We have closing letters for all of these. So when an investigation is complete, both the contractor and the consumer are told verbally as to the conclusion of the investigation. They also receive written confirmation. This is a glossary of essential terms. Just hope you take a look at it. I won't spend a lot of time on it. Complaint and investigations are synonymous with each other. We use them interchangeably. Administrative is an action that can result in an action against the license or a civil penalty. The registrar would be the final adjudicator of that, or I should say the board if appropriate. Criminal provides for jail time or prison sentences. We work with the DAs on those. Reactive, we refer to reactive complaints as consumer filed complaints generally, whereas the proactive are what our SWIFT unit, the work they perform. They're out visiting active job sites for license compliance. More essential terms that I just want to briefly discuss or share with you, and one is sweeps. A sweep should not be confused with the license compliance check that our SWIFT staff perform on a daily basis. A sweep is an operation that's planned and is conducted in conjunction with other state agencies. Of course, the sting, many of you have been on sting, so you know they're undercover operations where we target unlicensed individuals that are advertising for construction without the required license. A citation is a disciplinary action. We refer to that as an administrative citation. And then an accusation is to suspend or revoke the license. Many accusations are stayed. The accusation results in the license being revoked, stayed with conditions. If the contractor doesn't comply with the conditions, you can reimpose the revocation. And then finally, the notice to appear. We sometimes refer to that as a citation. However, NTA is more appropriate because that's a notice to appear in criminal court rather than a citation that it's an administrative and would provide for an administrative hearing. Completed investigations, we are showing what we did in 2014, approximately 19,800 more investigations in 2015. I punched the numbers for 2016, and what I came up with is that through the first 7 months of the year, we had completed 1,677 investigations. If that continues for 2016, we will perform 20,110 investigations. So it's a little bit of an increase over 2015. The intake and mediation centers, and what they focus on is resolving complaints. And 90% of our complaints are consumer filed complaints are received at either our Norwalk or Sacramento Intake and Mediation Center, and most of those are filed electronically. They don't always have the documents that are needed, so they have to be ordered. Some of those cases are filed, those complaints are filed confidentially, and so we have to call the party and ask them if we can release their name. If they're not willing to do so, we may not be able to pursue it. And they prepare the egregious licensee and non-licensee complaints for field investigation. For the non-licensee cases, what they do is they order DMV photos. They put together a 6-pack so that person can be identified by the victim of the unlicensed practice. These are just general numbers for the intake mediation centers, and you'll see that license complaints they make up 80% of what they work, 20% non-licensees. This has remained steady over many years. It's kind of what we call our 20% rule. When we respond or we go out on leads or we are performing sweeps, we find that 20% of the projects are being done by unlicensed contractors, and interestingly enough, 20% of our complaints are filed against unlicensed contractors. These are this consumer service representative goals, really. And what we have here is that when we receive a complaint, the goal is to open it within 3 days. And for the last few years, we've averaged 1.5 days to open up a complaint. 70% of the licensee complaints, we want to resolve them within 60 days. That doesn't mean that we've settled it with restitution. It means that we've resolved it by perhaps telling a consumer they may need to go to small claims court, or perhaps they filed with they should file with another board or bureau, or there may not be a violation, but 70% of the licensee complaints are generally closed at the intake mediation center level, and then we have a goal of 30% settled with restitution paid to an injured party. I'm going to introduce you to Consumer Service Representative Inga Hammond, and you'll see that on the wall she's got a lot of certificates. She's done a lot of training, and she's gotten a lot of recognition for settling complaints. She enjoys her job. And what's gratifying to see is for the last year, we've exceeded the 30% settled by hitting 40%, and that's in the restitution being over $10 million for 2015. The investigative center is a little bit different. So we're closing 7 out of 10 of the licensee complaints at the intake mediation center. 3 of those, 3 complaints out of every 10 are going out to the field investigation. And those generally are going to have some type of violation. That doesn't mean we're going to take an action, but it does mean that we're going to likely need to go to the job site. We're going to need to review the workmanship items of complaint. And most consumer complaints relate to workmanship issues, that they're not happy with the quality of the work, or they don't believe that they received what they contracted for and paid for. The field offices that I previously mentioned work very closely with building departments. We encourage them to have close working relationships with the building official and their staff, and to work with the prosecutors in the counties that they serve. Their goals are to contact the consumer within 60 days. And the reason it's 60 days is they argue that once they made the call, the investigation has started. When they call that consumer, they're taking the statement, and at that point, they're going to have to plan their investigation and whether or not they're going to need a site visit, an expert, and plan an interview with the contractor. Their goal is to complete 10 investigations per month. That's a goal that the staff came up with, along with consultation with the union that represents them. That's important that we have some type of a goal so we can manage our incoming complaints and don't have backlogs. And mentioned yesterday, we don't want to have more than 100 of the 3,500 complaints that are open at any one time exceeding 270 days. We have approximately 100 investigators, or case-carrying investigators, more if you count Swift. So if they each had one case exceeding 270 days, we would exceed that goal. Fortunately, we're holding, for the most part, below 100. Now, the responsibilities are, just listed them here, to perform site inspections, to perform thorough investigations, again, to be fair and impartial. They do have to provide, or they have to develop detailed reports that can be entered in as evidence. They could be at some point subpoenaed, and they do have to testify in administrative, civil, and criminal proceedings. So that has to be factored into their calendar for their month. These are the more common I see complaint dispositions, and that would be they can refer a case to arbitration, they can issue an advisory letter, they may still settle the complaint, and we do want to encourage them to settle when appropriate. But I want to point out the last bullet. I think it's very important that for the last 15 years that I'm aware of, 30% of the cases that are investigated by a field investigator result in a legal action. That's 2 cases relating to a licensed contractor and 1 non-licensee. So out of 10 completed investigations, 2 out of the 10 that relate to licensees result in either a citation or an accusation. And the trick is to determine how to get to those other 7 in a timely manner so you don't spend unnecessary time on them, so you can focus on the truly bad contractors and then help a contractor that may have made a mistake in writing a contract or did conduct poor workmanship to move forward without the need to take a legal action. But it's really the 30% rule. 3 out of 10 investigations will result in a legal action by one of our enforcement reps assigned to an investigative center. These are enforcement programs that are very important to the success of the enforcement division, and they do cost the board money, so I want to make you aware of them. The first is the Industry Expert Program, because most of our licensee complaints that are filed by consumers relate to workmanship issues. We need the industry to support us in going out and investigating these complaints to determine if the work meets minimum trade standards or if the work was completed per the contractual terms. We also have an arbitration program. And for the last, this fiscal year, we're tracking it very carefully, and we're showing a decrease in citations and a corresponding increase in arbitration referrals. And that's very positive, because if we can help the parties resolve the dispute through CSLB-sponsored arbitration, we want to do that. And if that results in less citations, it saves the board and the construction industry money. Now, determining if a case or an investigation warrants an administrative action or perhaps a referral to a local prosecutor, this is what we look at. Was it an egregious act? Many of these cases that are handled by the investigative centers are resolved because a contractor realizes that he or she made a mistake and they're willing to pay restitution to the injured party or mitigate it. Now, for those that don't, if it's an egregious act, they took money, they didn't perform, then a legal action may be needed. Repeat offenders, we issue advisory notices. We try to work with contractors to correct their business practices if necessary. But if they continue to repeat, then a citation will be appropriate, and ultimately we may need to file an accusation to suspend or revoke the license. And there's a statute that does say the registrar shall issue a citation for unlicensed practice. So that's not really a gray area for us. If you're contracting without a license, you are subject to a citation or a referral to the DA for criminal prosecution. And you'll see that we're up about 200 from 2014 and cases referred to prosecutors. When we have, again, a bad contractor, it's a viable avenue to pursue, that we can achieve revocation from the bench by making a referral to a DA. Upon conviction, we can ask for revocation from the Superior Court. While we are more successful in the intake mediation centers in obtaining restitution, we still receive restitution in the ICs, and this is one of our consumers that was harmed by a service and repair contractor that we discussed yesterday, and so we included her. She's somebody that has worked with us and certainly a supporter of our enforcement actions, but we almost collected $4 million for 2015. We have a SWIFT unit. They exist to verify license and workers' compensation requirements at active job sites. They spend most of their time responding to industry leads. In a minute, we're going to talk about how successful they are, but it's a valuable service that's provided to the construction industry. If somebody loses a job, they expect somebody to go out there and to check it out and to make sure that the person that's performing that work, that obtained that contract, is licensed and does have workers' comp for their workers. And finally, they conduct the stings and the sweeps. These are the offices that are open for SWIFT unit, the SWIFT staff. We have a supervisor in Sacramento, we have one in Fresno, and one in Norwalk. The others are branch offices, are not open to the public unless an appointment is scheduled, and that includes Carmel. Our authority to perform inspections with the SWIFT unit is found in the Joint Enforcement Strike Force. That's in the Employment Insurance Code, Section 329, and that gives us the authority to go on job sites, to work with our partners, to share information, to address the business practice violations that may occur at these active projects. So our SWIFT unit, we call them all JESIF, or Joint Enforcement Strike Force investigators. 11 of them are designated to perform designated sweeps with the Labor Enforcement Task Force. Those are coordinated sweeps, and they're led by the Department of Industrial Relations. We play a support role, but we also have the ability to identify the job sites that will be inspected. We take the lead role in finding the targets. So I just throw that out. If anybody has any larger targets that would need inspection, we can make that happen. You're pretty familiar with SWIFT stings, how we conduct them. We want to work with industry. We want to target contractors that we've previously warned or that have harmed consumers or been a problem to industry. They don't want to obtain a license. They continue to employ workers without workers' comp. They are a prime sting target. These are statistics for 2015. 631 NTAs issued. And NTAs are generally issued at stings. They can be issued in conjunction with the sweep with the permission of the district attorney. Here's our 2015 statistics. The 1,300 investigations open for leads, and you'll see 23% result in legal action. That's not too high. It's been pretty steady over the years. Again, it's something the board or the enforcement committee may want to take a look at. But when you look at the stings, where we call somebody based on an advertisement, our success rate and issuing a notice to appear is about 90%. So it's much higher. The leads, not so much, because often we get there's no work being done, or we find the contractor is licensed or does have a workers' comp policy and did not make the board aware of it. These are overall statistics, and you'll see the civil penalties that were assessed, over $800,000, 780 cases referred to prosecutors, and those cases were referred for unlicensed and uninsured practice. So once we've taken an administrative action, or if we have a licensee that's been subsequently arrested or convicted of a crime, it's handled by one of our case management centers. We have two of them. We have one in Norwalk, one in Sacramento. So they handle the administrative issuance of the licensee citations and the administrative appeals of the accusations, citations, and also the subsequent arrest information that we get from the Department of Justice. Their goal is to issue citations within 30 days of receiving it from a field office. Citations have increased by 70%. Now, if you think back to what I said earlier about the investigative centers, the legal actions haven't increased in the investigative center. So where have they increased? They've increased in the intake and mediation centers because we have staff in those centers now that are addressing permit violations, but also they've increased because of the subsequent arrest unit and taking action against contractors that have been criminally convicted of misdemeanors and felonies. And that's where you see the increase. The other increase is with workers' comp to a certain extent. This is just to give you a chart of the cases that were handled, comparison 2014 to 2015. The increase, when we say 70%, that's going back to 2010. And you'll see still, though, for misdemeanor convictions, as an example, when somebody's convicted of a misdemeanor and it's not like a repeated misdemeanor, they may well wind up with an advisory letter. And we don't use warning letters anymore. Let's see here. Cost recovery, we can get cost recovery for accusations for investigative costs. Also, restitution is often paid to injured parties through the process. These are numbers for 2015, $1,300,000 paid in restitution through the citation or accusation process. This is, now I'm going to get into some of the various programs that we have, and this I talked about a little earlier, and that's workers' comp insurance compliance and what our intake mediation center staff are looking at. We talked about a little bit yesterday, still looking for different ideas and how we can improve upon our enforcement efforts for workers' comp. The permit verification, it's been very successful, but we need to look at other options rather than citing for the permit violations that we routinely become aware of. Now, this unit was set up so that when a contractor doesn't obtain the contract and is concerned that the person that got the contract is performing the work without a permit, and this is very common in the HVAC industry, we will investigate those cases and we can take action if we can confirm that activity. And they've had a lot of success in doing that. Also, we receive leads from building officials. So these would be these are standalone permit issues that were not filed by a consumer. They were leads that came to us by industry or building officials, building department personnel. And our staff are very involved with disaster response, and fortunately they're still able to keep up their production goals, even though disaster response has taken a lot of time, especially with multiple fires. But they volunteered to go out and perform this service. They can do some work during slow times, but it's well received. And it's very important that we continue to partner with the Department of Insurance so we can have a proactive force before consumers are harmed or victimized a second time. Just more photos of disaster response. And this is our last slide. These are just some of the challenges that we face in enforcement. Staff recruitment and retention in Bay Area offices, including in Monterey County. We lost our investigator that was assigned to this county, and it's taken us at least 6 months to hire Zachary Zeman. Very pleased to have him, but the recruitment and retention is tough because people will move to a lower cost of living area. If you hire somebody in San Francisco, they'll look to transfer to Sacramento where they can perhaps buy a home. We have to keep an eye on consumer complaints. They could increase. So far, they're holding steady. We're able to manage what's coming through the front door. We need ongoing training for complex legal actions. We're pretty good at the administrative cases, but I believe we can do a better job for some of the very serious financial crimes where you need to obtain a search warrant and an audit. We do have the Riverside DA's office willing to take a lead on providing that training, but it needs to be ongoing. And then the supervision of off-site employees continues to be a problem, especially in SWIFT, where I mentioned we have 3 supervisors, and yet we have staff that are spread out amongst these various branch offices. It can be a challenge to supervise off-site employees. And that concludes the slideshow.
Thank you, David. Anything from the board? Linda?
So, David, do you think the retention is primarily related to the salary or the, the compensation?
Yes, it is. An apartment in the Bay Area will cost approximately well over $3,000 a month. And our starting pay for an enforcement rep, I want to say, is around $4,000, $4,500. Cindy, would you know? About $4,500. So you're in a situation where you would have to rent a room, but if you were to get hired in Fresno or Sacramento, you could have your own apartment or even perhaps rent a house. So that's a problem.
So primarily just the Bay Area on the compensation issue, are you saying?
Well, the Bay
Or
Area
just
is,
along the coast?
it's really on the coast. We have, when we talk about from San Jose down to Oxnard, we only have 2 investigators on the coast. And they're both SWIFT investigators. And one works out of her home in San Luis Obispo, and the other one, again, was just hired yesterday. So it is a continuing problem. We overcome the problem, though, by having staff that are based in Fresno investigate complaints along the coast, and they're not complaining because so they can rent a hotel and they can do their investigations. It's probably not the most cost-effective way to do business. But what we really see a problem with is in San Francisco and the Bay Area. There was a time when the board had 3 offices open to the public, one in Oakland, one in San Jose, and one in San Francisco. But we couldn't maintain the staffing levels, and so we transferred the staff to Sacramento. But we still need to have a presence in San Francisco.
Yeah, I would think so. The other thing is, you talked about, not this time, but the last time we did kind of a review like this, that your people were also getting picked off by law enforcement by, in certain areas. Is that not a problem anymore?
No, it is definitely a problem. One of the problems was when we would send our staff through a post-academy, and so they become post-certified. We pay them, I believe they make 5% more as a peace officer working for the board, but then that's still about less than $6,000 a month when you could take those qualifications and become a Monterey County DA investigator and make $130,000 a year. So that's why the board approved changing the requirement that they take that 17-week academy, because they were all leaving, absolutely. But the other problem is in the Bay Area, you could be a building inspector and make quite a bit more than what we're able to pay. I think Nancy may be able to comment on that, but we have had staff that have left for building departments that pay $2,000 or more a month than we are able to pay.
Are you suggesting the board should do something? I mean, is there something we can do about this?
We have 2 strategic, I'm sorry, Cindy. We have 2 strategic plan objectives to address both the pay differential for the classification and for higher cost of living areas, and the other one to look at staffing levels and to look at the investigative series. So they have them on there. We're monitoring that. No, that was good.
Kevin?
Just the 100 cases or the 270-day mark, what are some of those cases? Why are those cases going beyond the 9 months?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's interesting when you look at those cases, you would think that they would be the most complex or the most egregious, and they're generally not. What you have is a consumer that's filed a complaint that wants to continue to provide evidence in support of it. You have to cut it off at some point. If it's a serious case where someone took money and just left, and you could put that together very quickly, that can be done. The way we avoid having cases over 270 days old is by doing what we call providing case handling assistance. And so you'll sit down and meet with the investigator, and you'll find that this is something that the complainant hasn't been calling on, so you've been working other cases. Or I can tell you, I've been perfect, and Jesse too, we're involved in some right now. We have one down in Newport Beach, oh my gosh, that's over a year old right now, and it's not that serious of a case. However, the problem is when they continue to bring other contractors out to look at it and find other evidence they want reviewed, it becomes a problem, and you have to cut them off. But that's really that's what I've seen with the age of the cases. The statute that governs our cycle times, I don't remember the exact code for that, but it says that complaints should be handled within 6 months or up to 1 year for the more complicated ones. And there are some, like the service and repair that relates to the lady we showed on the slide, that you're working with the DA, you've done a search warrant, you then have to do an audit, and then they want to bring in the respondents. That can take some time. But I know that Jesse was telling me just the other day that in Southern California, one of the program managers has a goal to have no cases over 9 months. So it could be done, just some slip through the cracks, and we don't want to close a case and then reopen it. We want to be very clean with our statistics. But we have one I just share with you. I won't mention his name, but it's down in Santa Ana. And it's been so difficult to close this case for him. And it's only over $2,000, but he's got letters and complaints going everywhere, over everything. And once you think you have a handle on it, he brings something else up. And then you want to go out and address that. So.
Anything else from the board?
One last question. Just on the building officials and the building permits. When the building officials are bringing a complaint to you that somebody's working without a permit, is it more cost effective for us to allow them to carry that burden that they didn't have the permit, et cetera, and then provide that to us administratively so that we could take action? Or are we actually having to do that investigation and go through those steps?
Well, when I was discussing that slide, the staff that are handling the building department referrals don't go out in the field. And so you have a building official or inspector that has identified a job that's being done without a building permit. They have jurisdiction against the property owner, but often they know who the contractor was, so they just make the referral on the building. We have a special complaint form for that. And we're able to cite in most cases. Now, that's not to say that we wouldn't tell the contractor, look, you need to go back and get a permit, especially in the HVAC industry, and you got to comply with the Title 24 requirements at your expense, and we would close it without a citation. But it's actually a very easy citation to issue, and that's why we've issued over 400 of them. But I think at the Ledge Committee meeting, we're going to explore some other options instead of writing citations on all these.
Anything else from the board? On the phone? You got anything, Paul?
Nothing, I'm good.
Good. Public at the mic?
I'm good, guys.
Thank you.
Hi, Phil Vermeulen. Just a real quick question. How do you vet your industry experts? I'm curious.
Well, it's a very good question. An industry expert is critical to the success of the investigation, and there are minimum qualifications to qualify as an expert. You can't have been subject to any type of administrative actions. We check for civil judgments, and they must have been, of course, they'd have to be licensed, but also have 5 or more years' experience in the trade or the work they're going to be inspecting. So we are extremely careful with that, because once we've sent an expert out to inspect a job, we're stuck with it. It can be a real problem if it's a bad inspection.
Anything else from the public at the mic? No. Anything else from the board? Are you good, Paul?
All good, brother.
Next order of business is adjournment. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
I would take one of those movements to be a second. Roll call vote, please.
Kevin Albanese. Augie Beltran.
Aye.
Linda Clifford. David Diaz. Susan Granzella. Joan Hancock. Pastor Herrera.
Aye.
Ed Lang.
Aye.
Marlo Richardson.
Aye.
Frank Shetter.
Aye.
Paul Shafino.
Aye.
Nancy Springer.
Aye.
Thank you.
We stand adjourned till our next meeting. Thank you.